Hello, everyone. It's good to see you guys. Our speaker today is Dr. Michael Gutter. He is an assistant professor and financial management state specialist for the Department of Family, Youth, and Community Sciences in the Institute for Food and Agricultural at UF. He is the Certified Financial Planner Program Director at UF and launched the Florida Saves and Florida Master Money Mentor programs to help Floridians. The common theme that connects Dr. Gutter's research, teaching, and outreach is helping households achieve financial security. His projects focus on enabling access to resources and services, as well as improving people's knowledge and understanding about family resource management. He will be speaking to us about family financial management today. Please help me welcome Dr. Michael Gutter.
How about now? Oh my gosh, that's really loud. All right. I can't be as obnoxiously loud as I usually am. Wait. Then by all means, if we're doing it for posterity's sake. So there's a lot of little gifts today, and we'll go through all of them. Hopefully, I think everybody's got PowerPoint slides. These probably are already out of date. If you've had a professor at UF campus, you know, we post them online, and then we immediately change them right afterwards before we get to class. So I did that in honor of you guys, just to make sure you never forget your time here on campus. So there's a few things in there, but almost anything I added is with a QR code. Everyone familiar with QR codes? So if you have a smartphone, you can download any of the free QR readers. They're called Red Laser for the iPhone is a very popular one. You point it at the QR code, it will bring up the website that I'm referring to or anything like that. We also use bit.ly links throughout the presentation. So all you have to worry about is the stuff after the bit.ly if you want to write down any of the websites or things like that we're talking about, just to make it easier for you to use any of the resources we talk about today. So they asked me to come and talk about family financial planning, and I said, okay. I'm like, I teach like entire semester classes on that, but I'm going to talk about it in 20 minutes or less. So one of the things when people say family financial planning, I assume they emphasize the family part. So before we get started going beyond it, I want to talk and think about this notion of sharing resources, because really, when we think of what we care, why does it matter if there's a significant other in your world? It's mostly whether or not you're trying to share things. Because sharing, how many of you were ever a little kid? Once in our lives? Were you the best sharer? You did, yeah? How many of you would not say you were the best sharer as a kid? Yeah, see, that's kind of the thing, right? We're not really that great at it sometimes. And so part of why we don't always share is because we don't all want the same things. My son refuses to share with my daughter, even though sometimes he wants to play with her, because he wants to do one thing with the ball, and she wants to do the other. Therefore, they can't share because they're not on the same page. Well, we're going to see that has a lot to do that we can learn from my 8- and 4-year-old in terms of how couples can get along managing their money and doing all of those things. So one of the reasons why this matters is because at some point in your life, you may choose to share resources with people. Now, you may do this formally by getting married. And we talk about this really, that marriage is one of the choices people will make to do this and make this commitment. You'll find that a lot of older generations especially aren't getting married. They're committing to living together, especially if they've already been married or divorced or things like that, but they're very committed to sharing resources. They share a household. But the idea of getting married again may just not be their thing. So this idea then that we would say, with marriage, there's going to come a bunch of things that come contractually, that come legally. Rights, responsibilities, property ownership rules. For example, if you happen to get married and move to a state like Wisconsin, we were talking about Wisconsin earlier, it's very cold there, but if you choose to go there, which might be the opposite of staying in Florida, Wisconsin's a marital property state, which means that automatically, once you get married, everything you do is 50-50, even if it wasn't. Everything is 50-50. The debt is all 50-50. The assets are all 50-50, no matter what you do. That's kind of a big thing with marriage. Now, not every state's like that. Florida doesn't really make those quite assertions at all. But there's still other things to know. So with marriage, there's going to come a whole bunch of things that change. Okay? If you choose not to get married, many of those same things that could occur automatically with the legal document of marriage can still be done. They take a lot more paperwork. So when people often say to me, what can I do differently? Own things together. Title things together. That will help. Beneficiaries on contracts will help. So many things we can do to make sure that we still share resources. But it's more important than this, because that stuff comes later. What you have to think about now is, what does it really take to share resources? So I'm going to take a more example that hits close to home. Anyone ever have a roommate while they were in college? Did you guys have to share bills and financial obligations, right? Dude, I got the cable bill. You got this. Don't eat my food. You didn't pay for it, right? I was a college student. That's right. Professors were college students even longer. That's why we're professors. So I've been there too. I had those same fights with roommates. I had people I lived with that I didn't talk to afterwards because of things like that. And usually we all know at least somebody that lost a friend because you just couldn't make that work. You realize, wow, you're really self-absorbed. I never knew that till I lived with you and you started eating all my food. Okay? So, see, and so people are like, yeah, man. So regardless, trust. So what we're going to learn is that for any relationship that involves sharing resources, sharing financial resources and obligations, there's going to be some real critical components. And we're going to give you some basic skills to master those together today. Trust, communication, and organization. An organization is going to make those other things possible. And we're going to look at the end, the most common goal that I hear from my students in my classes is they know that in the next 5 to 10 years they'll probably buy a house. I say maybe, but they say, no, that's what I want. So we'll talk about why this applies to the situation of buying a house then, just to put this into context, if you don't mind. So, and I'll get to these bracelets. I'm just holding it to get your attention. So do you have good financial health? Now, part of what I want you to think about when we talk about financial planning, even though we're going to focus on this little laser aspect of it, is financial planning is enormously complicated. Good financial health, or the ability for you to kind of do everything you need to do today and then get to do the things that you want to do later, is kind of hard to come by. And the truth is, oh, look at that. I never done that before. I don't even know how that got in there. It's going to take a lot of effort. Just by yourself, if it's just you, you have to do all of these things. You have to manage your money. You have to not overspend, because overspending is going to mean that you don't really get to grow your wealth anywhere. You grow debt usually by overspending. We need to save. Save for the things we wanted. How many of you have a goal in life? Yes. See how easy this is? I know it's a very interactive lecture. What type of goals do you have? Yes, it's that interactive. You have to talk now. Yes, what's your goal? Graduate. That's a darn good goal. You do better than me then. Who else? Who else has a goal? What's your goal? Buy a, oh, that's like a real financially goal too, right? Buying a car. That's a good one too. So we want to buy a car. What else is there? Oh, I like the way you think, man. Yeah. Who else? That would be awesome. We would like that to happen too for all Gator Nation. So, without question. So these things are all kind of goals, right? We all want to do them. And part of how we have to get there, like buying a car and especially retiring in our 50s, right, which is 10 years before Social Security will be available to us, we're going to have to save. So we have to save for the future that we're planning for. But we also have to deal with the future that we're hoping doesn't happen. Now, I'll give you an example of this if you don't mind, a silly little story. It's a true story, though. Anyone have any pets? Anyone ever have a cat? Where's my cat people? All right, there's a few of you. I like to make sure there's cat people. Where's my dog people? All right, see, I had both. We have a cat now, though. That's my wife's choice, and the dog was my choice growing up. So when my wife was 6 months pregnant with our first son, our cat, Cisco, decided he wanted to go outside. Now, in Madison, Wisconsin, where we lived at the time, there's a leash law that even applies to cats. Cisco, of course, got out. My wife was chasing him. I did mention she was 6 months pregnant and in pretty good shape, but not really up to chasing a cat down a couple of yards, as you can imagine. So those of you with cats, you know what happens. Your cat's gotten out. Don't say it hasn't, right? You go and you get a little treat, and you hope that that'll entice them in. This is what we all do. In this case, she went and got tuna. This all took about 10 minutes, and by the time she was there, Cisco ran back in the house. She was like, that was pretty simple. And this is a very boring story. Until a couple minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and it's the police with animal control. And in the 10 minutes that Cisco had been out, he'd been chased into our neighbor's house, where she promptly decided, by their little dog. She then decided to pick him up by the scruff of his neck to toss him out instead of using a broom, which I thought was what everybody would do. And he did what any self-respecting cat would do. He bit her on the thumb. She then proceeded for the next 4.5 years to sue us over the loss of use of her thumb, which no doctor would testify to, but those of you who may be thinking of law school know that doesn't mean someone won't try and sue you for 4.5 years, right? So they kept doing this because they thought, ooh, he's a doctor. I'm like, no, I'm a professor. Not that kind of doctor. We don't make that kind of money, and a lot of doctors don't either, for that matter. So, this whole notion that they, we knew they were this lottery ticket, and, we found out that these people sued people regularly was the idea. Now, you may think, where is this story going? Besides the fact that it's obviously somewhat entertaining, is the fact that why did we not have a $45,000 legal bill, which is roughly what it should have taken us to do all of that battling, the countless motions, depositions that had to take place over 4.5 years? Because we had insurance. And not only were we smart enough to have insurance, you're all smart enough to have insurance, but what you have to know is to have the right insurance, because buying homeowner's insurance when you buy a house is required. What isn't required is a coverage that is added on for pets, because you didn't have to have it for your pet. You could have had that loss by yourself. If we didn't have our pets added on the policy, wouldn't have mattered. We would have been liable for all of those legal battles. So it's not just the simple things like, oh, dude, we knew to have insurance. It's knowing what your insurance should have said, guys. It's far more complicated than we think it used to be. Insurance companies will always look for ways to not pay a premium. So it's not just, I got to have insurance. Read your insurance policies. So my point is that financial management takes all of that, because my wife and I were savers. If we wouldn't have had the right insurance, all that 403B money we'd been investing in for 6 years would have been gone. Paying off all of that. So all financial planning is connected. Now, why plan your spending and savings? Because that's what you can control the most right now while you're in school. Let's give you something you actually can do. Number one, because anything you're going to accomplish, like getting ahead in the future, is going to be because you do this. Unless you already have all kinds of money accumulated, which maybe some of you do. But if you don't, then when you graduate, if you're an average student, you'll have $19,000 in student loan debt and $3,000 in credit cards. If that's not you, then that's wonderful, right? But that is the average college student, just so you know, right? So they're graduating with that. So we have to manage that when we do it. That means managing your money, because 6 months after you graduate, those student loan payments are going to come due. And you have to make sure that you can afford to make those payments regularly, because student loans is the number one issue for consumers to deal with right now, as you're going to talk about in one of the other sessions. So we need to help and do this. Now, this is great when you're on your own. Can you see then why potentially starting to get organized is going to be that much more critical when you're together with someone else? Because of this whole notion that now you have two people who both have access to the money that comes in and both have the ability to make the money go out. And if we're not talking about how that works, it's going to be really easy to not spend the same money, right? Or really hard. So the basic money management cycle for families to work in is to set goals, gather the information, write a plan, work the plan, and change the plan. So what this really means is writing SMART goals. And this is what we mean. Couples have to get on the same page. Where do we want to be? We had somebody say they want to buy a car, want to retire in our 50s, want to do all these things. Wonderful. Your significant other, do they know that? Are they on the same page with you? Have you reached those goals by consensus in some way? Because otherwise, are you working on competing goals or complementary goals? What if they don't want a new car in a few years? What if they want something else and are using the same money for it in their mind? Well, we'll just go take a vacation to wherever. And all of a sudden, there's the money for the car. Or somebody goes and spends something. Or somebody has a gambling problem. And before you know it, the $5,000 you saved is going to pay off a gambling debt. So the inability to communicate, right? And those are all really real things, even just online gambling alone. So families can work together. Now, I've given you guys a paper calendar that you can start working with on your own. It's called the Money Management Calendar. We give these out. We give out about 15,000 of these around the state year-round and help families organize their budgeting just through using a calendar. Now, some of you may be like, dude, that's paper, man. That's true. I don't use this either. Not because I don't like paper or I like the idea, but my wife and I wanted a system that was more interactive. So when you start sharing finances or even on your own, how many of you have a smartphone? Right? Your smartphone has this really cool thing, like likely accessing Google Calendars. You can create the same money management calendar effect in your phone, right, using Google Calendars or even iCal. And then the really neat thing is when you're with a couple, you can share that. So my wife and I use Google Calendar, right, to communicate all of our finances together just through that with one shared login. All of our bills when they come in go into Google Calendar. Our money when it's coming in goes into Google Calendar. And now we have a nice matchup. We track all of that using things like Mint, right? And, of course, our own websites. Okay? Things like Wells Fargo has an excellent spending planner now if you use your debit card. And if you don't use your debit card for things and you use cash, then you need to track it. You can use a calendar for tracking, or I'll show you a magic trick. Take any piece of paper and fold it in half 3 times. You'll get 8 boxes. That would be 1 box for every day of the week and 1 for a weekly total. Keep that folded up in your pocket or purse. If you don't want to carry a calendar and don't have a smartphone, you can still keep track of where your money's going. It's really hard to balance a budget without paying attention. So stay on track with something like a calendar. When you're in a relationship, that means you actually have to talk about these things. When the bills come in, you may need to communicate. So we tell people sincerely, when you're first starting off blending finances, have a money date. It's not fun. It's not exciting. You can go somewhere and have my wife and I, we do it. How many of you know where Sweet Dreams is? My wife's a big fan of salty caramel. So we like to go to Sweet Dreams, right? And we'll do our money date. And then as our reward for actually having done our money date and balancing our budget, we go to Sweet Dreams. Because we're very good about having money left over. It's more than enough to cover Sweet Dreams, right? But the idea is that we say, hey, let's go splurge and go get there instead of getting really cheap ice cream. But simple things like that help to make it something the couple does together. It keeps it going. Don't make this such a chore that it's burdensome. Make it part of what you do as a family, right? We even now involve our kids in some of the decisions, and that's a whole other lecture. So SMART goals, I know you were like, why does he call them SMART? Like a goal kid wouldn't be smart if he didn't agree with it? No. Specific, measurable, adaptable, realistic, and timely. You make the goals visual, right? Something you can visualize. Make them concrete in your minds. When you have that level of agreement, we know things like we'll take her goal for a moment if you don't mind, ma'am. I want to buy a car. She said, I want to buy a car in like the next 2 years or the next year and a half. Now you've told me when you want it, what it is you want. The next question inevitably for me will be, what kind of car you want? Because that tells us, are you paying cash? Are you going to finance it? Do you need a down payment? Because we can make that a very specific goal that I can communicate to myself so that I can track it, be honest with myself, that I can communicate it to someone else who I'm trying to share resources with so that they can track it, they can see it, they can keep me honest about it too. And integrating technology just makes that all more transparent. The more transparent we are, the better off we are. I'm not going to tell you that means you always have to have joint accounts with everybody. It just means you need to have transparency about that. My wife and I don't have every account jointly, but she can access my accounts if she wants to. I'm not hiding anything. And that's a big thing you'll find. One of the reasons why people fight about money is often an issue of trust and communication. We're simply not talking about it. We're not open about it. And the evidence is usually from their own homes. In many homes, since you guys may have guessed, I do research on economic socialization, how college students learn about money. In particular is what I've done research on for the last several years. What I can tell you is the ones that learn it from their parents, that's really great, but a lot of parents don't like to talk to their kids about money. So we don't come from families that were very open about money in some instances. So for us to do it is a change, is not what we're used to. So again, tracking your behavior. You set up the calendar. It looks just like this, right? I don't go through things that are in the notes too much. That's not the point of why you're here. That's why you have the notes in front of you. Review and revise, right? Did you go over? Where do you need to cut back? Make those decisions together. My wife and I discovered all kinds of cool, crazy things we could do to help each other save money. For instance, in my classroom, I bring candy a lot. It's kind of my thing. So my wife started getting really good about finding coupons and paying attention to the deals at the grocery store. So now, with CVS bucks and other things, my candy habit that was costing us about $20 every other week to feed my students in my class is down to about $5 a week, right? Because we just pay attention to coupons, do a lot of buy one, get one. And then I'll post on Facebook what candy was on sale, and then my students are like, sweet, because they know it's coming to class. So we communicate, and we talk about things like that, and that helps. So buying your first home, we're just going to walk through this in just a moment. Let's say you want to buy a typical home of about $220,000. That may seem like a lot, but it's not really all that crazy of a house anymore. You're going to need about $20,000 down. You may say, dude, I'm going to go with one of those no money down loans. Those are extinct, kind of like the dinosaurs, right? They aren't really good anymore. They had to go away because they created lots of problems, okay? So we don't aim for subprime mortgages in the Gator Nation. We aim for good mortgages. So that would be things like a 30-year conventional mortgage locked in at a decent interest rate. So let's assume for a moment that we did that. If we wanted to have that money in 7 years, then we're going to have to save about $199 a month. A simple time value of money calculation tells me how much I have to save. Right? We could do the same thing for our car and say, how much do I need to have a $1,000 or $2,000 down payment towards my car? Break it out, make it a savings goal, put it into your budget on your calendar, pay yourself first, get to where you're trying to go to. A little bit of organization and the discipline can follow. But it's real hard to be disciplined when there's chaos in your money management. And if you say, I've got it all up here, I'll make you read about 15 books on why mental accounting doesn't work for people, mostly because our brains are not as perfect as we say they are. So, building to the future, let me also tell you, perhaps even more importantly, this whole thing about couples. When you apply for a mortgage, you're seldom doing it on your own. You're doing it with somebody else on that application. There's this old notion we say in cooperative extension, look before you leap. Your FICO score may be great. What if your partner's sucks? Okay? So you'll find you have to make tough choices about who even is applying for mortgages together, who's doing things together, and you need to be upfront. Do you know how bad that would be to show up for the first time and never having told your partner you messed up with credit when you're trying to apply for a mortgage? That they have no idea that your FICO score is a 500, which is really bad. Okay? Just to kind of put it into perspective. So these are all the things that'll hurt your credit, right? I know you guys have another session that gets to this, and if ever you want to know more, I'm going to give you a bunch of QR codes you can follow up on in websites. So again, making sure that you know this. Oops, where did I do it? Now I made it all go away. Here's an example of why this matters. Your credit and his or her credit. Look at the difference in the monthly payments for the same mortgage, just by FICO score. And these are only the upper ranges, 620 and higher. The FICO score goes down into the 300s, guys. We don't show it because below 500, you probably didn't get approved for anything. There is no mortgage rate to quote you. Okay? So just keeping this in mind, same house. So your FICO score and your partner's FICO score will impact how much of a home you can afford because it's going to affect what you can borrow. Okay? So monitoring this. So why the organization is critical, because do you know what happens with lack of money management organization? We miss a bill. We miss a payment, or our partner misses a payment. Wham! Remember that FICO score measure? Payment history. Biggest thing, 35% of your FICO scores are payment history. Miss a payment, zap. Score drops. Didn't have to drop too far to cost you money, did it? We're not talking, right, 500-point swings here that are drastically affecting it. These are 40 and 50-point swings. That can happen just from maxing out a credit card. You can drop 20 to 30 points. Okay? Just from a simple thing as maxing out. Okay? If you could improve your score and work together, you can save money. So by bringing up your score as a couple, you can do that. How will that work? Communication. The only way to fix your credit is over time. Paying down debt, making your payments on time, especially if what you did was not make payments or overspent. Right? That's what's going to be what fixes it. There's no magic wands, I assure you. When we talk about housing, please don't listen to people who are going to sell you the mortgage. Look at what the economists will tell you about what you should afford in a mortgage. Right? Housing should not exceed 28% of your monthly income. That's the amount that goes to rent, for sure, should be about 20%. But a mortgage payment should not be much more than 28%. How do we know? The subprime crisis allowed people to get in for 40%. That's 40 cents of every dollar you brought home before taxes were taken out went to principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Not groceries, not electricity, not car payments, not other debt. To the house. That's unsustainable or non-sustainable for any family. Right? Back-end ratio, if you've got debt, we're talking about 36% for the total amount that you're committing for the month, because debt and mortgages are all fixed obligations. You've got to pay them. If you're obligating more than a third of your income to these fixed obligations before taxes, what's left? What's left for all the goals you have? What's left for everything else? You don't want to be house poor. Trust me, a house is neat. You live in it. It's great. I have one. I don't want to be house poor because I like to leave my house. This is Florida. I want to make sure I can afford to go to the beach and have gas for that too. So in summary, you're going to have to work together. You're going to have to communicate. You're going to have to be organized. And you're going to have to be disciplined enough to pay yourself first to reach those goals. Part of how that will happen is giving yourselves little reminders. So you can take one of these and some potential partner someday. These are nice little bracelets you can have. courtesy of Florida Saves and the chief financial officer in IFAS for Florida, that they all say, do I need this? So the next time you go shopping, take that bracelet with you. And you can take a little page out of my book. Take your credit card, put it in a little Ziploc bag filled with water, stick it in the freezer. Then go to the store, have do I need this on there. If you go to the store and you still really want something or need something after you've done all that, by all means, please go buy it. But you'll find yourself not really being prone to any impulse purchases when you change the rules of the game for yourself. So stay in control, right? Because, you guys are the Gator Nation. We're number one in everything, but not in debt. Okay? So any questions, guys? Thoughts, comments? Lastly, for those of you who may not be graduating or going to be on campus for a little while longer for graduate school, there's a whole host of resources. Gator Cash on Facebook or on campus can help you with one-on-one assistance. There's free web conferences always. In fact, we have one this coming week called the 9 Successful Skills to Couple Money Management. And that's free, of course, as well. And all of these bit.ly links, remember, everything after the LY is what you would need to write down. Just remember it was bit.ly before that. If you have a smartphone, the QR codes. If you need one-on-one assistance or you think a family member would, throughout the state of Florida, through cooperative extension offices, we have one-on-one master money mentors. On campus, they're called Gator Cash volunteers. They'll sit down with anyone, help them with a budget, spending plan, and repaying their debt. If you're a graduating senior, they'll sit down with you and help you come up with a student loan repayment plan as well. Totally free, overseen by me on the campus and throughout the state of Florida. So you can rest assured it's all part of the Gator Nation, of course, and part of your benefits for being in the Gator Nation. If you have a smartphone, that's what the QR codes are for, of course. And if you're interested ever in learning more after you graduate, there is a new online certificate program in personal and family financial planning as well. So if you're graduating, you can look at those classes if you're interested. But if you're still here on campus, there's face-to-face, undergraduate, and graduate courses, all related to financial planning. So thank you guys, though. And again, any questions, I'm good to go. I'll stop. Yes? Yes. Absolutely. There's a lot of really meaningful things to do. Like, for example, and I'll give you a whole other thing that you didn't even ask about, too. But you don't have to really have the interruption for your income if you plan ahead. For example, most people, when through your employer, are eligible for something called a disability insurance plan. Did you know that disability, or also called income continuation insurance plan, typically regards maternity leave as a qualifying event? So, for example, when my wife, when we were at Wisconsin, again, with that kid I was telling you guys about, the oldest, for most of her maternity leave, she had 3 months of where she still received 75% of her income, all because she paid into those premiums before. So, ladies in the room, especially, right? If you plan on taking time off from work to have children, if you're just saying I'm going to take some time off and then go back to work, until they can go to daycare, maybe a few months, this is going to make a big difference in your family's stability. So, planning for things like that is very meaningful, if you will, in kind of in that regard. Thinking through how much we need to have of things like insurance or all of those pieces, they're all really they're way oversimplified by people who want to sell you something, and are usually far more complicated than we want them to be, to really make sure that we're only giving what we need. So like insurance models, in my classroom, we only do needs-based analysis. We never use rules of thumb, because it's not very accurate. There's no cookie-cutter approach to financial planning. It's your life. What you care about is going to be unique to you. And the only thing that complicates that is that someone else in your life further complicated because they care about what they care about. And that's why we say those things. And there's even neat programs like Money Habitudes you can get from people like me and borrow to sit down with someone to learn about sort of your money values and habits. So if you're trying to combine resources, you can get a little bit of a heads up for, is this person more of a hoarder? Is this person more of a spender? Or things like that. So just learn about that too. But I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, having a child will change it. Having a kid will change almost everything, including how you use so many of the things that are out there. For example, this will be another one. This will blow your mind. So the number one thing that people complain about when they have children and they're a dual earner family, right, is this idea of daycare. Because daycare is pretty expensive. For us right now, it's about $700 a month for my 4-year-old, almost 4-year-old. That's really, that's not outrageous. That's just expensive, period. We're not overpaying by our estimate. It's just a lot. But here's the thing. Did you know that we save 30% of the cost? not because of any needs-based programs or anything like that. I'm a professor. My wife's a nurse, right? So I was going to say, I'm a doctor, she's a doctor. I'm like, nope, she's that. So we're not going to qualify for stuff like that. We're middle-class people. We don't have that. But there's another thing called a flexible spending plan that lets me pay my daycare bills with pre-tax dollars through my employer. So that means I save 30% of my daycare costs because I'm using dollars before they would have been subject to taxes. I'm in the 30% tax bracket. So it doesn't cost me $700 of what I would have spent in the month. It does cost me $700, right? But I would never have had all of that $700. So the actual out-of-pocket expense to me is $210 after that. So about, $590 if you will, or something. So, or $490. So that's what, right, paying attention gets people, if you will, right? I mean, the ability to do that, couples working together. My wife was like, gosh, there's got to be a way we can do this differently. Yes, right? And then she reminded me, I know all these things, so we made that decision to do that. So, there's going to be a lot of things that change. Being organized means that we know enough as a couple to say, this is what our bill is. Here's the timing of all of these things. How can we maximize this together? And then anyone who's organized would come across a flexible spending plan option. It's the people that can't even figure out where the bills are going, but there's no way they're going to go then have the time to do that research to say, oh, there's a flexible spending plan, right? So hopefully some of this stuff's been helpful for you guys. Any other questions? We're out of time, aren't we, Matt? We're out of time. I'm sorry. If you guys have questions, though, you've got my email address. You're always welcome to email me or anyone at GatorCash via Facebook or GatorCash at ifas.ufl.edu. But do the Facebook thing. It's 1,000 times easier for us. But again, any questions you guys have, we're always happy to follow up with you. Thanks again for coming.